Hello everyone, welcome to the first AWS migration tool. In this lecture, we'll discuss AWS import export. Don't get confused because there are two types of import export tools. One is AWS import export and the other one is VM import export. That is actually part of EC2. Now, AWS recommends using Snowball rather than AWS import export. This is our agenda. We'll have a small introduction on AWS introduction. Then I'll see how it works, the different types. I'll show you what a manifest file is, then what is CreateJob request, and finally we'll conclude this session with AWS Snowball, which is a different migration tool. So basically, I'll be covering AWS import export and Snowball as well. Now there's a disclaimer to all the migration tools that I'm going to discuss. The disclaimer is that I cannot show you demos of any of these services because I'm not doing any migration. It will not be possible for me to do any migration and show hands-on here. Before we start AWS import export, let me tell you that there are two services which are kind of same on a very high level. Those are AWS import export and AWS Snowball. In both the cases, what we do is we ship a physical device to AWS location and then import data inside of those physical devices to S3. For example, suppose I want to migrate all my applications which is there in this machine. What I'll do is all those applications are actually stored in the hard disk. If I use AWS import export, I'll ship this hard disk to AWS office or AWS data center. Then import job will be used, which will be used to import data which is there in my hard disk to S3. There's one more tool which is actually part of EC2, that is VM import export, as I said earlier. We'll discuss all of them. So AWS import export transfers data using physical devices. There's no requirement of any internet connection. Let's take an example. Suppose you have storage devices with size 2 terabyte and you have decided to migrate to AWS. One of the major migration requirement is to migrate the data. If you use internet connection, no matter how faster that connection is, it will take a lot of time to migrate those data. I'm talking about only 2 terabytes here. Instead, what you can do is we can send the storage device to our nearest AWS data center location and import data from that device to S3. When will you use AWS import export or Snowball? When your migration data size is pretty high in sizes of terabytes. Currently you do not have any internet speed which is actually 500 Gbps or 600 Gbps. So we have a limitation on the internet speed. Again, the latency is not guaranteed. Also, if you migrate over internet, that might not be secure. So that's where AWS import export, Snowball, all these tools come into picture. This is our server which has storage attached to it. And we can send this storage device to AWS. Once it reaches AWS location, we can import it to either S3, Glacier or EBS volumes. Data that is contained in a storage device is mailed to AWS, as I said earlier. AWS then imports that data to S3 or EBS. Data size has to be 16 terabyte or less per storage device. If your data size is more than 16 terabyte, then you'll have to send multiple storage devices. You have to create jobs for each of the storage devices so that you can import data from that storage device to S3. Now, how AWS knows whether to export to S3 or EBS volumes, and for that matter, which credentials to use? For that, we have to create a job. We create job to import data into either S3 or EBS. AWS Management Console does not have any option for AWS import export. There's a reason for AWS not to have this option in the Management Console. They want us to use Snowball, which is recommended by AWS over AWS import export. There's a very good reason behind that as well. Using AWS import export, we can send our personal and corporate storage devices to AWS. And all storage devices might be different. Suppose I'm sending a storage device from Samsung. You are sending it from Toshiba. And I have a different file system. Say, suppose I'm using NTFS file system. Someone else is using ext4 or someone else is using XFS file system or some other device type altogether. Think about it for a moment. There can be hundreds of different types of storage devices. And it must have been a nightmare for AWS to manage all those different storage types. So Snowball was launched because of this, and AWS recommends Snowball over AWS import export. It's not that AWS import export has been deprecated, but Snowball is always a better choice. We'll discuss Snowball shortly. The web service tool can be downloaded from the following location. Here are the steps to use AWS import export. First, you download it from here. Download the tool from this location. Then create a credentials file which will contain access key ID and secret access key of an IAM user. This IAM user would be used to import data to S3 bucket or EBS volumes. So you have to provide necessary permission to this user using IAM policies. Then we'll be creating something called manifest file, which will contain information about how to transfer data between the storage device which you are sending and AWS. I'll show you an example of manifest file shortly. Then we'll send a create job request. So the create job request would create a job request on AWS. So once we send the device, AWS will plug in the device which you have sent, and then the job will be started, and then that job would extract data from the device and put it either on S3 or EBS volumes. This is how we send a create job request. We use the AWS import export web service tool. It's a Java program, so we run it as jar. Once this is done, it sends something called a signature file. Now this signature file is saved in the local computer. Once the create job request is complete, this is the response that you get. So you get something called job ID, then job type. So this is an import job type. That means we are sending a device and will import data from that device to S3 or EBS. We have something called export also, wherein we can export data from S3 or EBS, extract it to a device, and get that device in our corporate data centers. So this job ID is pretty important, then the sign-in method, and then the signature. So once that is done, we get the shipping label. So once you get the shipping label, you ship your device, and then import will happen at AWS end. There are two types of jobs. One is used to import data from devices to either S3 or EBS volumes, and the other one to export from S3 or EBS volumes to devices. Following are the job types which can be used. If you are importing to S3, the source would be the device which you are sending to AWS. Files would be on storage devices, and those files on storage devices would be imported as objects in an S3 bucket. You can create only one device per job. That means one job per device either way. And whatever data you have in one device, that can be imported to only one bucket. You cannot use multiple buckets. If you are doing it in EBS, the entire device would be imported as one EBS snapshot. If you have multiple devices, you'll have to import all of the devices into multiple EBS snapshots. For EBS also, you have only one job per device and one snapshot per import job. Now let's see the manifest file which I was talking about. We create manifest file in our local directory where the tool has been downloaded. That means wherever you download the AWS import export tool, the manifest file should contain in that directory or in that folder. And the format of the manifest file is YAML. So this is how a manifest file looks like. It has a version. Then you have generator field which describes the application that put together the manifest file and submitted the create job request. Here is the bucket name. So this is the bucket name where your data would be imported from the device which you are shipping to AWS. This is the device ID. This is the storage device's serial number or any other unique identifier. Every storage device which you use has a unique serial number. So we have to mention that serial number. You have erase device. It says what AWS should do once the data has been extracted or imported. So if you mention erase device as yes, all the data from that device will be erased or wiped out. Email notifications would be sent to these email IDs once the import job is completed. Then you have to mention the return address, which is typically your corporate data center address, wherein you want AWS to send the device once the import is done and all data have been erased. These are the best practices. You should always encrypt the device and copy the data to the device and keep a backup of data so that if something goes wrong, you can always use the backup to restore all your data. This is an example of manifest file for EBS import. That means you want to import data from your storage device to EBS snapshots. The manifest file version is 3, device ID is 49382. So we do not have any bucket here because we are importing to EBS. But of course, you can mention log bucket so that the import export jobs log can be saved here. You have to create the bucket beforehand before starting the import job. Erase device has been mentioned as yes. That means I want AWS to erase the device, and the notification email and generator is AWS import export command line tool. That means I have generated this file using AWS CLI. This is the return address. So these are the operations which I want the import job to perform. Destination is EBS snapshot. That means where the data would be landed once it is extracted. So from the device which you are sending, data would be put in an EBS snapshot. Source is the device, which has this device ID. Region is US East 1. So how do you create job request, or how do you send create job request? You have to use the AWS import export web service tool to raise a create job request. There is a command, there is a Java command, so you have to run it from the directory where you have downloaded the web service tool. Once you create, you get the response file which I showed earlier. So once you get this response file, you copy the signature file to the root directory of the device. Then you run get shipping level API command and then you ship the device. Now there is one more thing, which is AWS credentials file. The name of the file is AWS credentials.properties. Now this file would be there in the directory where you have installed AWS import export web service tool. You have to update the access key ID and secret key in the file with that of the IAM user which you want to use, or which user you have given permission to put objects in S3 bucket or to create EBS snapshots. So basically it will contain the access key ID and secret key of the user which you created for the import job. So this is how AWS import export is priced. There's a calculator available in AWS. You can Google it, AWS import export calculator. Based on the size of data, based on the number of devices which you are sending, whether you want to ship the device back to your location, based on all those things, it will give you the price which is needed. Then AWS Snowball. This is similar to AWS import export, but here you do not send the device. AWS ships a device to your location where you put the data in and then send that back to AWS data center location. So AWS Snowball is a service for customers who want to transfer terabytes or petabytes of data to and from AWS. With Snowball, you can transfer hundreds of terabytes or even petabytes of data between on-premise data centers and AWS S3. Snowball uses Snowball appliances and provides powerful interfaces that you can use to create jobs, transfer data, and track the status of your jobs through to completion. By shipping data in Snowballs, you can transfer large amount of data at a significantly faster rate and in much cheaper cost. These are the Snowball devices. There are two types of devices, Snowball and Snowball Edge. Each device has different storage capacities. Now Snowball supports 50 terabyte and 80 terabyte of data, but Snowball Edge supports 100 terabyte of single storage or 100 terabyte of clustered storage. How it works is you have to create import export jobs again. So we'll create an import job from the console. Once you create a job, AWS will ship the Snowball device to your location. You'll have to connect the Snowball, copy data from your data center or from your storage devices to Snowball and ship it back to AWS. Once that is done, AWS will move data to S3. Now remember one thing, we can only move data to S3. Similarly, we have export also. We can create an export job. So once data is exported from S3 to the Snowball, that device would be shipped to your location, and then you can copy the data to your storage devices in on-premise data centers, and then either you can ship it back to AWS or you can repeat the process. These are very rugged and shock-proof devices, so basically you can be sure that during transit also nothing would happen to your data. So let me show you in the console how it is done. I'll not order or I'll not create any job. I'll just show you from which console you create the job and how the flow happens. From the console, from migration services, you can go to Snowball or type Snowball here. It'll take you to the Snowball dashboard. So here you have option to create job. So when you click on create job, there are two options. The first one is import into S3, which will help you migrate data from your on-premise storage devices to Amazon S3. The other one is export, which can be used to export data from S3 to Snowball, which will be shipped to your on-premise data center or to your corporate location, and then you can copy the data to on-premise storage devices. Then you have third option, which is local compute and storage only. So basically it is used to perform local compute and storage workloads. No data would be transferred here. Click on import and then click on next. Then you have to give the shipping address, give job details, and then you can set security. Once that is done, AWS will ship the Snowball device to this location, whatever you mention here. So now you know why AWS recommends AWS Snowball over AWS import export, because here the device is sent to you by AWS. You are not sending any arbitrary device to AWS. AWS already knows that, okay, I'm giving customer a pre-formatted or pre-known device, and when you send it back, the import is not that tough. That's all about AWS import export and Snowball. Thanks for watching.